Good afternoon, this is Andy with Infinity Mapping. I am creating this video specifically to answer what has become the most frequently asked question in the comments and for my videos, and is also something that I said I would do and haven't gotten around to doing. I am a fairly busy PhD student and haven't had a lot of time to spend working on either my YouTube stuff or pretty much anything else not directly related to my research. But here it goes. The most frequently asked question I've been getting from people in the comments section, and the reason why I get a lot of subscribers and then lose a lot of subscribers, since I haven't answered the question, is how do you map your S1000 plus ESCs or motors to the Pixhawk? How do you wire that up? I've also received similar questions about how to do that with the S900, which is something I haven't actually done, but the process for figuring out how to do it is pretty similar. So I'm going to show you all how to do it, or at least I'm going to explain the process, and I'm going to give you a couple warnings in advance. So warning number one is that when you're doing this, you want to have your propellers not connected to your motors. You don't want them connected to your motors when you're moving things around for this process, and you don't want them connected to your motors when you're testing whether or not you did it right. Trust me, you don't want that. Also, some additional warnings that I've got for you all now that I've been flying my S1000 for quite a while and also had a lot of opportunities to fly other Pixhawk powered large drones, is that the S900 and S1000 Plus frames are pretty affordable now. If I had to do it all over again, I totally would not do it again. So that's my thing. There's issues with the way Mission Planner works. It will lose settings if you flip between like your full parameter list settings and your initial setup settings. Things will sometimes get reset, and one of the most frequent issues I've had is with the landing gear. So that's just something to be aware of. Your landing gear may be set up perfectly and maybe you're working right. You go to your full parameter list and you change something for the gimbal, and the next time you flip a switch on your controller that you think is going to make the gimbal point a specific way, it retracts your landing gear. Which, of course, if your drone is sitting on a table and your landing gear retracts, can cause all kinds of problems. So I wouldn't do it again if I had to. But for those of you who are going to do this, here's how to map your motors. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the motor map for the S900. And you can see with the motor map for the S900 that you have your motor 1, which is supposed to spin counterclockwise, and your motor 2, which is supposed to spin clockwise. Then you have your motor 3, which is counterclockwise, motor 4, clockwise, motor 5 is counterclockwise, motor 6 is clockwise. Those are your spin directions. If we compare that with what Ardupilot says for the Pixhawk, we're looking at this diagram on the left for the hexacopter, you can see that motor 1 is supposed to spin counterclockwise, motor 2 is supposed to spin clockwise, and so forth and so on. The comparison indicates that the direction of the spin of the motors for the DJI S900 and according to what the Pixhawk is expecting is the same. So we don't need to worry about, with the S900, switching the motors or switching an arm or anything at all like that. However, what we do need to consider is this other thing that you'll see right away. With the S900 manual, you can see that M1 starts at the top right, and it goes counterclockwise M2, M3, M4, M5, and M6. Whereas with the Pixhawk diagram, you can see at the top right would be motor 5, and then it goes motor 3, 2, 6, 4, and 1. These numbers correspond to where the motor should be plugged in to the back of the Pixhawk. So on the back of your Pixhawk, you have, let's see if they have it up here. Yeah. On the back of your Pixhawk, you have something that looks like this, where you see here the white numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If we're working with an S900, we only have 6. Your motors need to plug in to the correct spots on the back of here. Since M1 on the S900 corresponds to motor 5 in the Pixhawk diagram, your M1 motor needs to be plugged in to spot 5 on the back of the Pixhawk. If we go back here again, we would go to M2. M2 on your S900 should plug in to motor spot 3 on the back of your Pixhawk. M3 on your S900 should plug into spot number 2 on the back of the Pixhawk. M4 should plug into spot number 6 on the back of the Pixhawk. M5 should plug into spot number 4 on the back of the Pixhawk. And M6 should plug into motor spot number 1 on the back of the Pixhawk. Now, as if that wasn't already a little bit confusing, the process for testing whether or not you did this right is even more, I'm going to call it idiotic. It's idiotic. And you'll see why. This diagram numbers the motors 5, 3, 2, 6, 4, and 1. Once you have all of your motors plugged in and you think you've got this right, you can go into your Mission Planner software and again do this with the props off of your motors. I can't emphasize that one enough. You can go into your Mission Planner software to initial setup. Underneath initial setup, there's a section called motor test. And in motor test, you can actually test the mapping of your motors to see if you got it right. Why they're calling it test motor A, test motor B, test motor C, test motor D, instead of test motor 1, 2, 3, and 4, I couldn't tell you. But A is 1, B is 2, 3 is 4. All right, A is 1, B is 2, C is 3, D is 4, E is 5, and F is 6 if you have a hexacopter. So, if you want to test M1, you would want to test motor E, which is motor 5, which is where M1 is supposed to be. Okay? If you want to test M2, I think that was motor 3, that would mean you would want to test motor C, which is going to be the third motor on your list in Mission Planner. And that's how you would test to make sure you did it right. So, that's for the S900. We're going to go up to the octocopter now and look at that situation. So for the S1000, I'm sure that they did this in the manual to make it fit and look cool, but it would be really helpful if M1 and M2 were rotated over a little bit. I don't know why they did it like this, but basically M1 and M2 are the front of your octocopter, and then M3 and M8 are still in the front but to the left and right, and then you have M4 and M7, which are more toward the back of the copter, and M5 and M6 are fully toward the back of the copter. So that's how you're supposed to look at this diagram. We want to compare, first of all, the rotation of the motors for M1 and M2 and make sure that we don't need to switch anything. So our M1 motor is supposed to go counterclockwise and our M2 motor is supposed to go clockwise. if we look at what the diagram says for the S1000 or for an octocopter in general for the Pixhawk, you see a problem right away. And the problem is that the first motor in your octocopter, the one that's furthest to the top of the copter and a little bit off to the right, is supposed to spin clockwise, not counterclockwise. It's supposed to spin clockwise. Whereas with the S1000, that motor 1 is supposed to spin counterclockwise. So how do you fix that? You fix that by switching the arms of the M1 motor and the M2 motor. So you just those are the two with the red mounting brackets. You just take your M1 motor and you put it in the M2 spot. And you take your M2 motor, the whole arm, and you put that in the M1 spot. And now you've switched the rotation of those first two motors. Okay. Then what happens? Well, M3, according to this, is supposed to be counterclockwise, but according to your Pixhawk documentation, M3, what amounts to M3 is supposed to be, that's right here, is supposed to be spinning clockwise. So what you do is, like I said, you switch your M1 and your M2, and then you just make sure that every other arm that you put on your S1000 frame alternates clockwise and counterclockwise. Your M1 will be spinning clockwise. Your M2 should be spinning counterclockwise. Your M3 should be spinning clockwise. Your M4 should be spinning counterclockwise. Your M5 should be spinning clockwise. M6 counterclockwise. M7 clockwise. M8 counterclockwise. Once you've done that, and basically you've thrown DJI's manual about where the motor should be out the window, once you've done that, you have another issue you have to deal with, which is similar to what we did for the S900. And that issue is that your motor mapping to the back of your Pixhawk needs to be done correctly. So remember that your M1 motor now is actually going to be spinning the opposite direction of what the manual for the DJI thing said. So your M1 motor, which should be spinning clockwise, is going to be plugged in to the back of the Pixhawk in motor spot A, or 1. God, motor spot 1. That's right here. Okay? You're going to plug it into spot 1. Your M2 spot on your frame, we're not talking about the arms and motors anymore in that way because that's going to be confusing. But the M2 spot on the frame here is now motor 5. And so you are going to want to plug in the motor that's in that M2 spot into the motor 5 spot on the back of the Pixhawk. M3 is going to be plugged into motor 7 on the back of the Pixhawk. M4 is going to be plugged into motor 6. M5 is going to be plugged into motor 2. M6 is going to be plugged into motor 4. M7 is going to be plugged into motor 8. And M8 is going to be plugged into motor spot 3. Now, again, you want to test to make sure you got this right. You want to make sure that your motors, when you spin them up, spin in the direction that this particular diagram here shows, not what the DJI manual shows. And you want to make sure that you do that without your propellers on. Okay? So we're going to go back down here and we're going to look at this again real quick just to highlight the stupidity of the way that this is named. Test motor A means test motor 1. So you're going to test motor 1. And you should expect to see motor 1 spin up on your octocopter. Test motor B is motor 2, and when you push that, you should expect to see motor 2 spin up on your octocopter. Now, going back and looking at this diagram one more time, you can see that, so you test motor A, it's going to spin up this one here. You test motor B, and it's going to spin up the one on the opposite side of the drone over here. It's not going to spin up the one next to it. It's going to spin up this one. When you test motor C, it's going to spin up this one here. When you test motor D, it should spin up this one. So you want to make sure that as you test this, you're looking at this diagram and the motor that's supposed to spin up is the one that is spinning up. And you also want to make sure that it's spinning in the direction that it's supposed to be spinning, whether it be clockwise or counterclockwise. And that is how you map an S1000, an S1000's electronic speed controllers, or the S900's electronic speed controllers. That's how you map them to your Pixhawk. If you're already in a situation where you have a frame and you have an autopilot and you're gung-ho and you're ready to go, I wish you the best of luck. Like I said, I wouldn't do it again, myself personally. I love flying it. It's a blast. I get a lot of work done with it, but I have other drones that I use, like Action Drones makes, located in California. They make some really good industrial quality octocopters and quadcopters, and they make them for the military and other things too. But those are really good. They use a Pixhawk, so that's still an open source system. They have RTK, so you're still not dealing with a Chinese company like DJI with your autopilots and everything that might mean for different governmental work. So there are better options out there. And anyways, thank you for watching, and now you all know the answer to the most asked questions that I've been getting on my YouTube channel.